Welcome back, everybody. So I was just watching James Corbett's show, and he was talking about this on your screen. It's called Bitterman's Chart of Coercion. It was written in 1956. He showed it in this image right here. It's been going around the internet. And Bitterman, I think his first name was Albert, was a psychologist who wrote about torture. So communist coercive methods for eliciting individual compliance. He wrote a big work about how the USSR was performing torture and what methods they were using against all sorts of different people, including Westerners, and that's where this comes from. So we're going to go back to amnesty.org's document and take a look at it, because this dates back to earlier than the meme. Okay, and then after that, let me show you what else we're going to do. We're going to take a look at a book from 1968. It's written by Gary McEwen and David Bender. It's called The Radical Left and the Far Right, and we're going to discuss how these sort of social movements and social factions are indeed manufactured, and they never change. You're going to be pretty shocked at the similarities between today and what was going on back then. So let's start with this, Bitterman's Chart of Coercion. So remember, the context here is torture. Precisely, communist coercive methods for eliciting individual compliance in regards to torture. So on the left, there's a column titled The General Method. These are different methods of torture. In the middle, there's a column called Effects or Purposes. And then on the right, there's a column called Variants. So the first general method is, of course, isolation. Here are the effects and purposes of isolation. It deprives the victim of all social support of his ability to resist. It develops an intense concern with self. It makes victim dependent upon the interrogator. So we can break that down a bit. We're going to put this in the context of the state, of course, and we're going to talk about, we'll look at that image, but as you guys know, I can't talk about this current thing going on. I'm going to be careful. But you know what this relates to, right? So this isolation method, it takes away social support systems. It's absolutely true. And it gives people time to reflect on self. And that's one of the effects or purposes of it. Because when, the average person does that, they tend to question themselves and question reality and question their thoughts, and they become sort of vulnerable. And of course, it makes the victim dependent on the interrogator. If you're not, standing firm spiritually, and if you're not educated and prepared for this, you're definitely dependent on the mainstream today. As we can see, right? As we can see by the way people are responding to everything that's going on. So what are some variants of isolation? Complete solitary confinement, of course, love it. Complete isolation, semi-isolation, and group isolation. So we're definitely somewhere in between semi and group isolation, right? Depends on where you live. Where I live, I think groups are limited to 50. I don't know. Comment if you know. Portland area, but I think it's going to be lower. Churches are definitely lower than that. So we're definitely in the variant of semi and group isolation. We're not at complete or solitary confinement yet. That would suck. No, that would be great. We would definitely flatten the curve if we had complete solitary confinement and complete isolation. Honestly, guys, that's what we need. This is what we need right here. Okay. The second general method is monopolization of perception. Wow. Pretty crazy. I just instantly thought of the MSM, and I instantly thought of the movie The Matrix. Monopolization of perception. So what are the effects or purposes of it? It fixes attention upon immediate predicaments, and it fosters introspection. Wow. We definitely have some immediate predicaments going on, and we're talking about the two big ones today, so we got to be careful. But you guys know what those are. You know what's going on. Fixes attention upon immediate predicament, and it fosters introspection, right? They throw so many different... We're just flooded with information 24/7, boom, 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 nonstop. And you get information from different sources on the left, different sources on the right, and every single little bit is different, and it's meant to confuse you, and it's meant to make you question yourself, and that's where the introspection comes from. That's where after we fix upon the same topic every single day, and it fosters the introspection, and it makes us question reality, confuses us, right? It's like a fog of war that's come over society. It really is. Fourth generation war. Okay, the other purpose of monopolization of perception is it eliminates stimuli competing with those controlled by the captor. Wow. Think about it. We're all stuck in our homes, so we are at basically the mercy of our personal libraries, our personal hobbies that we have in our home, or our technology. What do you think, ABC? What do you think the biggest factor is in that? You know what I mean? Like, most people are just addicted to technology, and they're on it 24/7. They're at the mercy of these information technocrats. Okay. The other role is it frustrates all actions not consistent with compliance. Yes. Yes. So it's the reason, if we didn't have the news, and one day the governor, y'all got the newspaper, and we didn't have mainstream, I guess, put it that way, and everybody in the neighborhood found out one day that the governor decided to do what's happening today. Everyone would be like, what? Absolutely not. But because we have this monopolization of perception, this mainstream media, everybody just goes along with it. The MSM frustrates all actions not consistent with compliance, right? And they do that with all sorts of different arguments and different examples, and it's brutal. It's brutal. Okay. So, are there any variants of monopolization of perception? Let's see. You can do this with physical isolation, darkness or bright light, a barren environment, restricted movement, and monotonous food. Those are different ways to monopolize someone's perception. Wow, restricted movement. That seems kind of relevant. Okay, the third general method on Bitterman's chart of coercion is induced debility and exhaustion. The effect and purpose of this is it weakens mental and physical ability to resist. Now, there are a lot of variants to this. That's the only purpose. The purpose of induced debility or exhaustion is to weaken mental and physical ability to resist. Pretty simple. But let's read the variants. Semi-starvation, exposure, exploitation of wounds, induced illness, sleep deprivation, prolonged constraint, prolonged interrogation, forced writing, overexertion. I think we can bend a few of those to definitely go along with 2020. Absolutely. Think of what we've been exposed to. It's not just memes. It's not just media. It's trauma. Trauma. Every single day people are exposed to trauma through their devices and through their computers and through their televisions. They watch videos of people getting knocked out from behind, people getting shot. Think of Jay Danielson, right? Rest in peace. That video is everywhere. KR, I can't say his name, but videos of real life examples of death, and it's traumatic. And we've talked about this before. It's got a purpose when it comes to MSM. It's trauma-based mind control. These are things they learned through MK Ultra, MK Naomi, and tons of other programs, hundreds of programs that were all exposed in the church committee. And yeah, they still do it today. So, once they've traumatized the public, see right here, it says exploitation of wounds. That's exactly what they're doing. They're just picking the scab open every single day. Every single day. They pick the scab open and it never ends. And, this is a pretty broad term, induced illness, right? Well, what is illness? It can be a lot of different things, and suicides are up, overdoses are up, and depression has to be up. I mean, I haven't looked into that, but I'm sure it is. Sleep deprivation happens to people when they're stuck and motionless all day, right? Prolonged constraint, that's Sounds familiar to me. Prolonged interrogation, forced writing, overexertion. Wow. So, number 4 for general methods. Number 3, that was nuts. Number 4, threats. That's it. Threats. What are the effects and purposes of threats? They cultivate anxiety and despair. Wow. Now, for variants on that, you have threats of death, threats of non-return, threats of endless interrogation and isolation, threats against family, vague threats, mysterious changes of treatment. Wow. That's pretty wild, guys. Threats of death every day. Every day. It's part of the trauma, right? Every single day. Now, if you're watching this, then it doesn't affect you, but you have to put yourself in the shoes of the majority, the shoes of the sheep. Sheep don't wear shoes, but you understand. Put yourself in the wool. Threats of death every day. And then threats of non-return. You're not going to return to normal, right? This is the new normal. That's what we call it. Got to flatten that curve. Threats of endless interrogation and isolation. Yeah, every day. Every single day, right? Camps are floating around in the MSM. Interrogation. We've endless videos of that. I literally, before recording this, was just watching one from Rebel News in Canada. And I won't forget High Impact, I think last week, had one from Australia where the guy received like a 20,000 pound fine and he lives in the middle of the woods by himself. So we are seeing endless interrogation and endless isolation. Threats against family. Just destroying holidays, especially Christian holidays. That's what affects me. Vague threats. Yeah, vague threats. And what comes to mind for me is the Horowitz video. Remember that? Can't remember. He was speaking with some truther on a show. And Mr. Horowitz, the constitutional lawyer, said, you don't have a right to refuse a you-know-what. You know, a doctor, the police can take you out of your home and bring you to a doctor and boop. I don't believe that, but he's a pretty powerful voice to be saying that. And then we have mysterious changes of treatment. That's actually happening today. They're talking about they're talking about a mutation, guys. Have you heard this yet? It's not worth covering. I'll just get a strike if I cover it. But yeah, they're talking about a mutation. There's also information from the MSM talking about how even with the boop, you can still get and transmit the thing. It's ridiculous, dude. It's ridiculous. Okay. General method number 5. So yeah, threats, totally, every day. Trauma-based mind control. Okay, 5. Occasional indulgences. Oh my goodness. General method. What are the effects and purposes of occasional indulgences? Provides positive motivation for compliance. Hinders adjustment to deprivation. Wow. So let's talk about this one a little. Provides positive motivation for compliance. It's kind of like Stockholm Syndrome, right? When you get these little bits of good news on your smartphone, these little bits of good information, this little glimpse of hope, or maybe like number 17, a lot of people are starting to think, and the way the crowd around the current president, is just keeps ringing the people on and on, go, we're not giving up, but we never get any results. Yeah. So occasional indulgences is definitely in use. And then hinders adjustment to deprivation is the other purpose of it. There's a great book. There's 2 great books I have in my library. One's called Night, and the other one's called, what's the other one called? It's by Viktor Frankl. Something, the meaning, I can't remember. But both of them survived the Holocaust and lived through absolute hell on earth. And especially Viktor Frankl talks about eventually adjusting to it and, having this perception of the world that is rock solid, becoming, just transcending the evil he was surrounded by and having this spiritual foundation. Crazy. Both of the authors suffered so much. And what I'm trying to say is they were able to adjust to their deprivation of freedom. They were able to adjust to the deprivation of food. And they were able to transcend it mentally, right? And that's, you can't have a slave do that, basically. That's why they didn't teach slaves to read and stuff like that. It's pretty evil. Okay, let's stay on topic here. Occasional indulgences. What are the variants? Okay. Occasional favors, fluctuations of interrogators' attitudes, promises, rewards for partial compliance, tantalizing. I mean, that all of those speak for themselves. Rewards for partial compliance. Ugh. And they're not even rewards. People just go along with it. They're not. They take away our rights, and then they tell us that they're rewarding us by giving us a little bit of it back. For example, letting businesses operate at like 25%, limiting their capacity to like 10 people, restaurants and stuff. Like, what? But people are tricked, by the trauma-based mind control, and they think it's a reward. And they believe the promises that they're being told, We're rounding the curve. That's what the president said a lot. With they tantalize us with the future of going back to normal. Oh, boy. And, of course, occasional favors falls under that 2-minute, happy story on the news every day. Okay, general method number 6, demonstrating omnipotence. Wow. What is the purpose and effect of omnipotence? It suggests futility of resistance. Okay, so the way these people are so confident, right? It seems like they're completely in the lead, dominant, we'll never get out of this, that sort of thing. Now, what are the variants on this? We have confrontation, and we see that every day. I was just watching that video from Rebel News, like I said, and it was this black member of the CAF, the Canadian Armed Forces, just going to the mall, shopping with his girlfriend, and 4 security guards, like, rip the guy to the ground over C-19 protocols. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. C-19 protocols aren't a joke. It's not a joke. Gotta flatten the curve. Anyway, there's a lot of videos going around like that. Endless confrontation videos. Okay, and then the other variant for demonstrating omnipotence is pretending cooperation taken for granted. Oh my gosh, they do this so bad, especially the New York politicians, right? They're like, we tried to work with the people, we tried to give them a chance, but they won't comply. It's exactly the method that's being used this whole time, week after week. They pretend cooperation is taken for granted because we don't comply enough. Even though they'll say this the whole time, no matter what, even if there is 100% compliance. Okay, and lastly, for demonstrating omnipotence, the variant is demonstrating complete control over victim's fate. I think we're seeing that too. Absolutely. Okay. General method number 7. This should be a good one. Degradation. What are the effects and purposes of degradation? Remember, this is all in regards to torture. Makes cost of resistance appear more damaging to self-esteem than capitulation. Reduces prisoner to animal-level concerns. Okay, let's read that top purpose again. This is the purpose of degradation. It makes cost of resistance appear more damaging to self-esteem than capitulation. Okay, I see what's going on here. So degradation would be the type of torture. I mean, I could see sodomy or stuff like that. You know what I mean? Very brutal. Absolutely disgusting. But yeah, capitulating would be a lot less degrading than having that performed on myself, in my opinion. The other one says reduces prisoner to animal level concerns, and yeah, that's definitely, okay, makes sense. Variants of degradation. Personal hygiene prevented. Filthy infested surroundings. Demeaning punishments. Insults and taunts. Denial of privacy. So these bottom two, insults and taunts, denial of privacy. That's, yeah, we live in that. Absolutely. My Facebook picture the other day when I got accosted by the manager of Hannaford's and not allowed in because I wasn't wearing a mask, and he threatened to call the police. He called the police, and some random guy Instagrammed me or something and wrote such a punchable face. So there's your insult and taunt and your denial of privacy all wrapped up in one. These are daily things we all go through. Demeaning punishments are surely on their way. And whenever you watch these movies full of predictive programming, like that movie Songbird coming out, if you've seen the trailer, they always predict the near future as being filthy and infested, like these little ghettos, similar to the ghettos, right? There's so many movies like that. I just watched one last night. I think it's called Children of Men or something with Clive Owen. It was a good movie. But yeah, filthy infested surroundings is a theme in predictive programming. District 9, remember that movie? Yeah, they force all the people to live in those like Hoovervilles. Ugh, and then personal hygiene prevented. Hopefully we don't encounter that. Okay, lastly, number 8, enforcing trivial demands. Wow, spot on, 2020, enforcing trivial demands. What's the purpose of it? It develops a habit of compliance. Wow, that's what everybody's stuck in. Number 8, ugh. Okay, what are the variants? Forced writing and enforcement of minute rules. So yeah, he's talking about people like in captivity, but you can apply this to the state. Absolutely. Wow, enforcing trivial demands. I can think of a few. But yeah, people just get in the habit of it. Everybody. You see people walk outside with the you-know-what on their face and get in their car and rock it, and then, they'll go into Hannaford's, put it on, then they won't take it off and they leave. Just, oh man, sad. Okay, so that's it for, I'm going to say Albert. I think his first name's Albert Bitterman's chart of coercion from 1956. And I'll flash this again. I didn't want to keep this up because it's probably flagged. There's some ridiculousness. Here, if I do this. Nice, now they can't see that word. But yeah, you can find this with a quick Google. Just look at the title. Bitterman Report, 1956, Communist Coercive Methods. And then, of course, the word we're covering up. That'll come right up in DuckDuckGo image search. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. Now, second thing we're going to talk about is this book from 1968, The Radical Left and the Far Right. So you can see at the top there's a Black Panther symbol, and then I'm not sure what that symbol on the right is. We will probably find out, but it looks like a white supremacist symbol. And then at the bottom, you can see you got the ruler with radical all the ways on the left and reactionary all the ways on the right, and then liberal and conservative in the middle. Fringe groups speak on the problem of race. There are several very powerful articles in here. Let me just show you the table of contents. It's kind of small. Hopefully you can see it. I'll try to get it to focus. If not, I can just read them to you. There's one article in here that we have to read. It's about the University of San Francisco. You guys, it's going to blow your minds when you hear what they were saying back then and you look at what's going on right now. Okay, let me just read you the contents. So the first one is Revolution in the White Mother Country and National Liberation in the Black Colony, written by Eldridge Cleaver. So basically what we have in here is writings of the most extreme. So the first one I just read, Eldridge Cleaver, he was a minister of information for the Black Panther Party. Eldridge Cleaver presented this Ministry of Information black paper to the Peace and Freedom Founding Convention in Richmond, California on March 16th, 1968. So yeah, guys like that. And then we have, similar extremists from the right. So what we have here is Goals and Objectives of the National Socialist White People's Party. The following statement appeared without author in The Liberator, the National Socialist student publication. So it's basically an article about creating a white America with white world solidarity, a new social order. So basically this was, college text. This is my grandfather's book, and this was published in 1968, so he probably taught this to his high school kids, right? And it's, on the one hand, critical information to understand, critical to know, and definitely worth reading. But on the other hand, it has a subtle magic to it, where it sort of causes the reader, especially the young reader, to see society in terms of these extremes. they begin to try and identify these viewpoints in their everyday life. And when they try, sometimes they can manipulate their own minds and succeed. And what happens is you have a sort of BLM situation or a Black Panther situation on the left, and then there's always this counterforce, this reactionary force on the right. And you see the word reactionary right there on the cover. And when one thinks about it, do you think these sorts of things would exist if we didn't try and study them and teach them and perpetuate them into the minds of young kids, right? And in my personal thought, I think if we just didn't spend all of our time talking about race, we wouldn't have a problem. I think small issues would be solved amongst communities. I think, basically what I think is that the majority of our social issues today have been manufactured. And I think you might agree with me once you hear what was going on in 1968. How long ago was that, you guys? 40, 32, plus, was it 52 years or some ridiculous number? Let me look it up. I don't want to embarrass myself. Calculator. 2020 minus 1968. Yeah, 52. So 52 years ago. Wait until you hear the similarities we got going on. And we're actually going to use a document in this book. Let's see, I'll show you it. So, you know how on Facebook we all have groups regarding, our social feelings and whatnot, each side? Same with Twitter. Same thing back then, but it was in person. This is way too small. You're not going to be able to see it. They did it in person too back then, especially college students and young people, and they created unions and societies and associations and movements, in person, which is a very effective thing. So reading number 10, San Francisco State College Student Demands. That's the title of it. Sound familiar? San Francisco State College Student Demands. Okay. The student demands that follow were presented to the administration of San Francisco State College by the Black Student Union in the Third World Liberation Front in December 1968. So, real quick, that's a great example of these sort of student unions, student groups, right? And it's also interesting we have the Third World Liberation Front because that army of lefties in the Pacific Northwest call themselves the Youth Liberation Front. You see, it's the same playbook. This is 52 years ago. Okay. Now, here's the actual primary document, the Black Student Union. And it looks like a numbered list, 1 through 10. Okay. Black Student Union demand number 1, that all Black Studies courses being taught through various other departments be immediately part of the Black Studies department, and that all the instructors in this department receive full-time pay. Wow. Number 2, that Dr. Nathan Hare, chairman of the Black Studies Department, receive a full professorship and a comparable salary according to his qualifications. Okay, that's fair. I get that. 3, that there be a Department of Black Studies which will grant a bachelor's degree in Black Studies, that the Black Studies Department, chairman, faculty, and staff have the sole power to hire faculty and control and determine the destiny of its department. Number 4, that all unused slots for Black students from fall 1968 under the special admissions program be filled in spring 1969. 5, that all Black students wishing so be admitted in fall 1969. That's it for demand number 5. That's a bold demand. All Black students wishing be admitted. 6, that 20 full-time teaching positions be allocated to the Department of Black Studies. Also a very powerful demand. 20 full-time teaching positions be allocated to the Department of Black Studies. Today, well, it's kind of weird today because a lot of professors are adjunct professors. It's kind of a weird, freelance way. That's how they rip off the professors. So let's pretend a tenured, 20 full-time tenured professors' salaries. It's a tall order. Okay. Number 7, that Dr. Helen Bedesim be replaced from the position of financial aid officer, and that a black person be hired to direct it. That third world people have the power to determine how it will be administered. So a direct call to fire someone based on race and replace them based on race. Demand number 8, that no disciplinary action will be administered in any way to any students, workers, teachers, or administrators during and after the strike as a consequence of their participation in the strike. So, legal immunity. Number 9, that the California State College trustees not be allowed to dissolve any black programs on or off San Francisco State College campus. Number 10, that George Murray maintain his teaching position on campus for the 1968-1969 academic year. And those were the 10 demands of the Black Student Union at San Francisco State College in 1968. And we'll talk about the Third World Liberation Front. They have 5 demands, but let's pause and reflect on the atmosphere of this, right? So let's see, 1968, you go back 10, 15, 20 years and California was a red state. California was a Republican state. California, it changed very quickly. And it changed in a similar way that America is changing today. Today, it's changing on the whole. And in fact, the world is changing on the whole, which is some crazy witchcraft, how they're pulling this off. Back then, it was done on a more local level. California was changed into what it is today back in the 1960s. And just like today, that change was brought about using race. So before we get to the Liberation Front, let's take a look at a modern college. Let's see what we got here. Okay, here we go. This is the University of San Francisco. So not San Francisco State, but, same city. They're probably right next to each other. And look what's happening today, 52 years later. Anti-racism resources, a selection of materials to empower people to move beyond simply not being overtly racist and into active anti-racism work. So I've highlighted the phrase there, anti-racism, right? And here we are at USM, which is the college I go to, and we can actually find the exact same phrase. Let me just search real quick. It's right in the title. Anti-racism pledge. So let's go back to California here. It's a little more subtle than these 10 demands from the student union. Of course, students are more aggressive and emotional and passionate about what they do, and they're less polished in their delivery. But here's what the faculty and the leadership of San Francisco University say. Black Lives Matter. Gleason Library aims to work vigorously for freedom and justice for black people, and, by extension, all people. We acknowledge, respect, and celebrate differences and commonalities. We also acknowledge the roles our institution and many other academic libraries play, both historically and today, in the ongoing subjugation of black people and their intersections between librarianship and systemic racism. We affirm that Black Lives Matter. It's so... like up here where they say they respect and celebrate differences, they don't though. And we see that with the active censorship of religious people and the active censorship of liberty-loving people. It's pretty brutal. It's getting very brutal, right? And the manipulation and propaganda through today's media is causing these people, the left, we'll call them, the new American left, to in a lot of ways just accept violence towards their other side. Now, the reactionary side, just like in 1968, the Proud Boys are fighting back. Guys, it's all manufactured, and it's ridiculous because they teach us that pretty much. Using this guide. Oh, it's a guide. We come down here, we have black student communities at USF. The first one is the USFCA Black Student Union. Oh my goodness. Guys, it's the same union. I'm not even kidding. I didn't pre-record this or anything. I swear, hold on. I swear to goodness. Let me show you in the book. This might take a second, but it's worth it. There it is. This was literally the student demands that followed were presented to the administration of San Francisco State College by the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front in 1968. The Black Student Union. And you're going to tell me that they haven't made any progress in 52 years? That's not the reality of the world we live in. We live in the most equal and free society ever created to our knowledge. That's not it, though. The Black Student Union, of course, still kicking around 52 years later. Then we have the Black Achievement Success and Engagement. Acronym is BASE. Then we have the Black Community Council, or the BCC. There's your 33 right there. Then we have the Black Resource Center and the Black Resource Center Gleason Library Collection. And I'm sure you can go there, and there's a lot of literature like Ibram Kendi today and Black Panther writings from the 60s, and just like I was talking about earlier, they just create and manufacture this sort of paradigm or this matrix in the minds of people, especially when they're young and in college, and they create this racial divide that really doesn't exist, and where it does exist, it's very small, and it's looked down upon, and it's shamed. So it's a sad state we live in, and we're dealing with the same trickery they've been using for quite some time. Okay. Campus resources, student services, Office of Diversity Engagement and Community Outreach, diversity. Bias Education and Resource Team, acronym, BERT. Center for Academic and Student Achievement, Counseling and Psychological Services, Crisis Services and Resources, Health Promotion Services, Wellness Coaching and Wellness Checks. And then you can see here they list a bunch of articles and books about anti-blackness and the critique of multi-racism, Anti-Racism Incorporated, As Black as Resist, Finding the Conditions for Liberation, Between the World and Me, Black Feminist Thought, Black Skin, White Mask. Oh, that's a good one. Unbelievable. A Black Woman's History of the United States. The Body is Not an Apology, and it's an overweight Black woman. Cambridge University Press, Protest Policing and Race. The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap. Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City. Experiencing Racism, Exploring Discrimination Through the Eyes of College Students. Feminism is for Everybody. The Fire This Time, Frederick Douglass. Have Black Lives Ever Mattered? Hood Feminism, How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America, How to Be Anti-Racist, How to Be Less Stupid About Race. I hear my people, guys, this goes on and on. We're about halfway down this list. So this is, when you walk into the Gleason Library, I'd imagine this is what's on display, and this is what is being encouraged, and this is what every teacher is teaching. Hopefully not every teacher, but at this point I'd say probably every teacher at some of these schools, especially California. This is using emotion and race to change the way a society functions and change the way a society believes, and it's very, very deceptive. It's very dark. It's very evil. It's a very sick form of carrying out conflict, carrying out cold warfare. That's what this is. It is using emotion and fear, right? They create echo chambers, and they manufacture and manifest this racial divide. And look what it's doing today when I'm not seeing any racism. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I'm looking. I'm not finding it. So it's a pretty sad state. Absolutely. The college I go to, same thing. Here's an article from July 2020. USM, that's the University of Southern Maine, offers 2 free online classes on social reform and racism in America. Yeah. Same old story, same old song and dance. All right, guys, I think that pretty much covers it. So I just basically wanted to talk about the documented proof that the things we are being put through constitute forms of torture. That's what we looked at from the Amnesty USA. So this is legit, guys. This is legit. And just to leave you with some more instances of this, take a look at the screen. This is also from amnesty.org. This is what James was talking about, James Corbett. And I want you to look at this image on your screen. I'm going to accept the cookie so that you can see this. So you're welcome. Num, 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 num. Look on your screen, and you can see these prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, and they're wearing something very familiar. Not the orange jumpsuit, or the goggles, or the handcuffs, or socks. They're wearing something very familiar to us in this current thing we're living in. And notice the officer here, whatever they are, the cadet, isn't wearing that. Yeah. So this is what they do at Guantanamo Bay when they are trying to torture people. Here's another example. They don't give us many pictures from Guantanamo, but you can see here that they're all wearing the familiar thing, right? Let's see what else we got. Oh, here's a good example. Let me zoom in. So yeah, you can see here where my mouse is circling. This is torture, and that thing is used in the torture. It's part of the torture, and it has been for quite some time. Interesting. Okay. Yep. So I just wanted to let you guys know we're dealing with some crazy dark witchcraft. That's what I like to call it that. I don't know what forces we're up against, but I think it's definitely dark. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys later today probably, and be safe in the snowstorm.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.